All right. So this week we're going to be talking about the pharmacology dealing with the autonomic nervous system and skeletal muscle relaxants. And you'll see some crossover between these when we go through them. So let's first just kind of go over the nervous system, a quick little overview of the nervous system. So in your nervous system, you can break it down into the peripheral and the central. Central nervous system is going to be brain, spinal cord. We have some muscle relaxants that work on the central nervous system. In the peripheral nervous system, you have sensory and the motor portion. The motor can either be somatic or autonomic. Somatic motor is dealing with skeletal muscle for conscious thought, like I want to contract this muscle, I want to move my arm. You're using somatic motor. And so a lot of your muscle relaxants work on somatic motor, right? But we're also talking about the autonomic today. So the autonomic is going to be all the glands, effectors, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle that isn't controlled consciously. So it's all subconscious control there, or autonomic, right? It's automatic. And you have two divisions. You have the SANS and the PANS. The SANS is the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. The PANS is the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. Parasympathetic deals with kind of like everyday homeostasis, just kind of living your life and digesting food. Sometimes it's called the rest and digest side, while your sympathetic is your fight and flight. So when you're in very stressful situations, when you either need to fight for your life or get out of there, the sympathetic flips on. And so when we're talking about your parasympathetic, the major neurotransmitter that we're talking about is going to be acetylcholine. It has cholinergic neurons, neurons that release acetylcholine. Now, there are a lot of cholinergic neurons. There's a lot of receptors throughout the body that bind acetylcholine. When we're in the parasympathetic, we're going to be focusing on muscarinic receptors. When we talk about our skeletal muscles and those relaxants, we'll talk about nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. And even like in the parasympathetic, so you have a pre and post ganglion. The pre-ganglionic nerve fiber also releases acetylcholine, but that one binds nicotinic receptors that then go on to release acetylcholine on the muscarinic receptors. But with the parasympathetic, like really what we're focused on right now is these muscarinic receptors. So on the effectors, the things that are going to change, so glands or muscles or whatever, you will find the muscarinic receptors there that bind acetylcholine. For our muscarinic receptors, you'll have stuff like decreased heart rate, pupil constriction, increased gastric movement, increased salivary production, things like that. The nicotinics, again, we'll talk about those more when we get to the skeletal muscle. All right, and your sympathetic kind of have two major neurotransmitters. You're going to have epinephrine and norepinephrine. Really, though, like the thing that gets released from the adrenergic neurons, the neurons that are releasing adrenaline, right, adrenergic, you're going to get norepinephrine. Epinephrine gets released from the adrenal medulla, and it acts more like a neurohormone. So it's going to go out into the blood and start turning on things that way. All right, so we have a lot more than just one receptor in the sympathetic autonomic nervous system. In the parasympathetic, like we're just like focus on muscarinic. But here in the sympathetic, we're going to have four that we're really going to pay close attention to. You're going to have alpha 1s, alpha 2s. Alpha 1s, you're going to find this in a lot of your smooth muscle, in the blood vessels in the smooth muscle, and then also in the sphincters. And so the smooth muscles of the sphincters. And what you see is contraction. So when alpha 1s get stimulated, they contract. And so they get smaller. Because you don't want a lot of blood going to your visceral smooth muscle. That takes blood away from other parts of the body. like your skeletal muscle, which you're going to need when you're running for your life, right? And so it diverts that blood to other places that are going to need it more. Your alpha-2s, these act like a negative feedback mechanism. So you're going to find alpha-2s throughout the body, mostly associated with adrenergic neurons. So neurons that are releasing norepinephrine. And what your alpha-2s do is they bind norepinephrine. So if you're releasing a ton of norepinephrine, some of that is going to come back, right? It's going to diffuse back, and it's going to bind these receptors. And that tells that adrenergic neuron, okay, we have enough norepinephrine out here. You can, like, calm down. We don't need to release any more. There's tons out here. And so alpha-2s act like a negative feedback mechanism. Then we have our beta-1s and 2s. So beta-1s you're going to find on the heart. And so they're going to speed up heart contraction. They're actually going to increase heart contraction strength. And so you're speeding it up, it's contracting harder. Overall, you're increasing the cardiac output. How much blood can you pump per minute, right? Your beta-2s, we're also going to find these on visceral smooth muscles. You're going to find it with your bronchioles, with your liver. And what these do is dilation. And so vasodilation, you're going to get opening up. And so it helps to open up the bronchioles when stimulated so you can get more air into the lungs. It can do vasodilation going out to your muscles or to your skin if you need to like give off heat or get more blood to your muscles. You'll be using beta-2s. There is a beta-3. It's associated with adipose, and we're not sure exactly what goes on there. I'm sure there's more research being done, but last I heard. Alright, so the sympathetic axon terminal. Say this is our sympathetic axon terminal, this is our postganglionic neuron, and this is going to be our effector, some sort of smooth muscle, or cardiac muscle, or gland, whatever it is. Your norepinephrine is going to get made and packaged in vesicles, okay? What happens is out here, floating around outside of the cell, your neuron is going to take up amino acids. One of the amino acids it takes up is tyrosine. So tyrosine is kind of like the base for a whole group of hormones, neurotransmitters, called catecholamines. Catecholamines include stuff like epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And so tyrosine comes in here, and through a couple different steps, you form DOPA. DOPA is the precursor to dopamine. So you form DOPA, which is dihydroxyphenylalanine, or DOPA. So you form DOPA, and then you form DOPA into dopamine, and then you take dopamine and make norepinephrine. And so all that's going in here. We bring our tyrosine in, step, DOPA, dopamine, into norepinephrine. And now it's ready to be released into the synaptic cleft. Okay? Whenever you have your signal that comes down and stimulates this, so the whole process of nerve conduction, again, learn that in physiology, I'm not going to go over that, but the conductance gets down here, you release your norepinephrine, it travels across and binds to its effector, okay? And what it's binding to depends on the organ, right? So if it is binding to the heart, it'll be binding beta receptors, and then increasing heart contraction, that kind of stuff. If it's being released in the smooth muscle, maybe it's binding an alpha. If it's getting released from another adrenergic neuron, maybe it's binding alpha-2. Like, it just depends on what specifically you're going for, okay? And then, after it gets released, it gets reabsorbed pretty quickly. You don't want this thing out there that causes your body to be like on 10, right? You don't want to have a lot of this neurotransmitter out that is going to have your heart rate up, your breathing rate up, your pupils dilated, because that's burning a ton of energy, having it cranked all the way up like that. And so we release it, it gets reabsorbed. If we're still in that situation, we'll release more of it, right? And so it either gets reabsorbed and reused, or it gets reabsorbed and broken down. Since it is a catecholamine, it gets broken down by an MOA, monoamine oxidase, monoamine oxidase, yeah. You might have heard of MAOIs, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, and we'll talk about those more when we talk about like sedation and depression and that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to stop there and we're going to pick up with some of the different types of drugs that work on the autonomic nervous system.